The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, November 1st, the pre-election, post-Halloween edition of The Rundown. No tricks here today, just the treat of learning about contested races across Western Massachusetts. Joining me to do this is the NEPM News Director, Sam Hudzik, Paul Tudhill, Reporter Emeritus, and on the phone, Berkshire Eagle reporter Clarence Fanto. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What issues and ideas have the candidates put front and center? And how have they tried to reach voters amidst this presidential election cycle? Well, let's hang in and find out, shall we? Looking at Congress, all three congressional seats in Western Mass that are up for re-election this cycle have challengers. That means one Senate and two House seats for those keeping track at home. We'll start with that Senate seat with Elizabeth Warren, who is the incumbent, facing a challenge from Republican John Deaton, a lawyer and a Marine veteran. And as I said, he is challenging Elizabeth Warren. The Senate debates on the whole, I think, could have doubled for presidential debates, given the number of national and international issues that took center stage. They talked about immigration when they were here in Springfield. They talked about the war between Russia and Ukraine. Cryptocurrency came up. Not a surprise, because Deaton is a lawyer in that industry and has made quite a bit of money from that industry as well. What stood out to you here, panelist Paul Tuttle? I'll start with you about the races run by Deaton and Warren.
Well, you know, I spoke with a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, who's written about the financial and banking systems extensively for years. Does not live in Massachusetts, but is not a big fan of Senator Warren. They watched the debate that NEPM hosted here last month and said they came away unimpressed with Deaton as a candidate. And I think the fact that the cryptocurrency industry and others have not poured significant dollars into this race indicates that they're pretty unimpressed with Deaton's chances.
Deaton did put quite a bit of his own money into the race. Sam, anything that stood out to you?
No, I just think that's really interesting. I mean, Senator Warren has tried to make a big point about Deaton getting a bunch of his funding from the cryptocurrency industry, but Paul points it out, it's still small potatoes in the grand scheme of what's being spent on Senate and a lot of House races around the country. This, just from outsiders who are looking to invest the money, they're not seeing this as a good investment.
Yeah, and obviously they're campaigning to reach voters across the whole state. But for me, with my listening ears tuned on Western Massachusetts, I thought neither of them, when they were here in Springfield for the debate, took the opportunity much to capitalize on the fact that they were here in Western Mass to sprinkle their answers with a little bit of ways to reach Western Mass voters.
I think that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was going to say, well, they both agreed on East-West Rail.
Yes, they did. That was probably the only thing they agreed upon in that debate.
That's true. And being from Western Mass, being proud of this area and all that, and being a reporter in that, I'm always looking for those Western Mass things. But I also think, let's note, this was one of only two debates in this race. And while we love this area, it represents 12% of the population in the state. So they had a pretty wide audience. And we know Senator Warren, with all of her national media visits, also is always looking to talk beyond Massachusetts as well.
Yeah,
sure,
obviously.
And people down in New Bedford could say, hey, how come there were no South Coast questions asked, right?
Yeah. And
we did have one from the Cape.
We did have one from the Cape.
All right.
This is fair. Clarence, how about for you out in Western Mass? I think John Deaton was out there ahead of the primary. Elizabeth Warren has had some stops. Have there been a lot of stops from either of them this cycle?
No, not at all. I think Berkshire County is correctly perceived as the very deep blue county that it is. Deaton was here in August, and that's the only appearance that we know of. Senator Warren was here for a couple of private fundraisers for the Democratic presidential ticket and perhaps her own campaign fund. But Deaton has received some favorable mention on the Berkshire Eagle's editorial page by state political specialist, Bill Everhart, who used to be a longtime editor of that page, and he pointed out that Deaton is a moderate in the tradition of former Governor Weld and former Governor Baker, and that the fact that he's not part of MAGA world and not a supporter of Trump wins him some props around here, but not enough to make a significant impact on the outcome, certainly.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the U.S. House seat held by Richard Neal, who's facing a challenge from Nadia Milleron, who's a lawyer and a farmer from the Berkshires there, Clarence.
Right.
But earlier this month, Politico released an article that scrutinized the activity of a lobbying firm owned by Congressman Richard Neal's son, Brendan Neal. According to Politico's reporting, Brendan Neal's firm earned almost $200,000 for consulting work related to his father's campaign, and also earns money from lobbyists with business in front of the Ways and Means Committee, which Neal is the ranking member of. NPM's Adam Frenier asked Congressman Neal about that report, and here's what Richard Neal said.
My son never lobbied me, nor did he lobby any of the staff. You know that there was nobody that was able to step forward and say they had been lobbied. There was no untowards behavior here.
But Nadia Milleron, the independent candidate who's running against Neal, she disagrees.
These are damning allegations. They are disqualifying. Richard Neal should step down from his office or answer this and subject himself to an ethics investigation.
Now, we haven't heard that Neal has any intention of stepping down, but what about the ethics piece of this investigation? Might this be something that's taken up by the Office of Congressional Ethics, Paul?
It might. I really don't know. Look, Neal is a master of the insider's game in Washington. He's a prolific fundraiser. He makes no excuses for it. He's proud of it. This article, while well researched and well written and documented and accurate, I just don't see where it has any legs to impact this race, this outcome.
I think it's a good point. I mean, because if you read that from the outside and you had no idea about all of Neal's prolific fundraising and all of the lobbying ties and the fact that his son was a lobbyist, if you didn't know that, then maybe this would be really surprising to you. But I didn't see anything in there that is going to lead the Office of Congressional Ethics to be able to look at it, because I don't know that I saw anything there that was a specific violation of the rules or the laws. It just looked shady.
Yeah, right. And it's just information for the public to have, and it's publicly available. Politico obviously used those documents and had this report coming out. But one of the things that Milleron has made a key point of this campaign is how much money Neal is able to raise, and that she says that he has spent a lot of time raising that money.
But as a result of all the effort he puts into getting money for his campaign, he doesn't spend that time calling for hearings and investigations on crucial issues that are affecting his constituents.
Neal has had quite a few challengers in recent cycles, and I was thinking about Milleron's approach here and whether it's different enough from those who's challenged Neal in the past and lost.
I think it's a really good question. I mean, we had Tahira Amatul Wadud, who ran a spirited campaign against him. We had, of course, Holyoke Mayor Alex Morse, who ran and got somewhat close, made it somewhat competitive. Look, this is a long shot race. She's an independent. She didn't challenge him in the Democratic primary like those other folks. And we know, I did the story about long shot candidates a few years ago and talked to this political psychologist, and he said there are two reasons that people run who are long shot candidates. The first one is that they hope it gets them exposure for a future run. And the second one is that they want to convey a message. And we know that Milleron has a very strong message from her personal story about her daughter dying in this Boeing jet crash, and she doesn't think Neal has done enough on that front. So do long shot candidates hope that something happens and they win? Yes, but this really seems like a message candidacy to me.
Yeah. Clarence, for you out there in the Berkshires, what's top of mind in this race?
Well, Nadia Milleron has received some attention here. There are quite a few lawn signs for her in that race, but Neal is very popular here, despite these other reports, for delivering a great deal of federal money for infrastructure projects, for new public safety, first responder building projects, and so on. So he delivers a lot of funding for the Berkshires, given his seniority in the House. And if the Democrats were to take back the House, which is not impossible, he would again be chairman of the Ways and Means Committee.
A post he's had in the past. All right, let's turn now to the U.S. House Representatives in the 2nd Massachusetts district. That seat currently held by longtime incumbent Jim McGovern. He is being challenged by Cornelius Shea, who's, again, an independent candidate. Sam, you reported on this for NEPM. Tell us a bit about Cornelius Shea.
Yeah, so he's a retired teacher, retired Marine. He got into this race after it looked like Republicans weren't going to put a candidate forward, so he started collecting the signatures to get on the ballot as an independent. He's mostly self-funded. Just had a few $1,000s. He denies he's a Republican, says he's a former Democrat. But, when I pushed him a little bit on it, he did say that he was voting for Donald Trump. And his main issues, immigration and how Massachusetts is welcoming migrants and housing them. The way he talks about that stuff, it falls in line with a lot of the Trump talking points. And his limited campaigning that he's done so far, he's done some interviews, including here on the Fabulous 413, but his limited campaign outreach so far has been to conservative groups.
Yeah, and I heard him joke on the Fabulous 413 that his wife was frustrated because he was about to write another check to help the campaign.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Shea has talked about is this idea of term limits, and he is definitely a supporter of them. They're a priority.
Our founding fathers never intended for career politicians because they knew you get down there 30, 40 years, you end up, there's a chance to become arrogant, and you put power into the hands of a few.
And because of that, he thinks there should be a 12-year cap. So that's for whether you're a senator or a representative. Incumbent Jim McGovern, who's been in Congress since 1997, has a different view on this. He told NEPM that term limits would be arbitrary.
I just, on principle, believe, that voters should have the power.
A poll last year, NEPM reporters pointed out that Pew Research study found that nearly 9 in 10 Americans support congressional term limits. So, Paul, do you think that this is an area where Shea can get some traction with voters?
No.
Care to elaborate?
In Sam's, in the story that Sam did, the quote that stuck out to me was Shea said that beating McGovern would be really, really, really tough. He's really, really, really right.
I think it's so. Term limits are such we hear about them all the time, and they're very popular, as you pointed out, broadly. But is it an issue that anyone
probably is with some people. I'm not sure how broadly popular they are.
Well, broadly popular in polls when people are asked if they support them. But is anyone voting on that as their main issue? I think that's a really important sort of question to ask there. And I do think just sort of the traction that Shea sort of hasn't gotten is not surprising to him. But he also said that he got into this because he didn't want McGovern to be on the ballot by himself, just running unopposed. And that goes back to what I was talking about with long shot candidates. His message is he thinks there should be a race, and there's something admirable about that.
And Jim McGovern, for his part, this time around, I've heard him discuss, protecting the environment. He's a longtime champion of anti-hunger efforts across the district. Does he even need to make much noise, then, to reach voters?
He hasn't done very much campaigning that I've seen. I saw in an interview where he told a reporter that he was spending his efforts at focusing on other races around the country in the hopes that the Democrats can retain the House and that he can once again be chair of the Rules Committee.
And the size of the war chest that McGovern has, he can help those candidates.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Congressman Neal's doing the same thing, spending money out of his political action committee on other races around the country. It's not an uncommon thing for Democrats who are in a comfortable position in their own district, or Republicans who are in a comfortable district in their own district, to go out and campaign around the country and even recruit candidates to run, which I know Neal has done and McGovern has done as well.
Yeah, and I think McGovern's biggest political sort of problem in this last couple of years is not Cornelius Shea from Shrewsbury, right? Its biggest problem is these members of his own district, folks in his district who are really pushing him on Palestine and what's going on with the war. in Gaza, and he's been the target of demonstrations in his outside of his office. They've labeled him an accomplice to war criminals. He's really frustrated by this. He's trying to talk to them about it. He's pointed out that his voting record is among the most progressive in Congress on this issue, but it's not enough for a lot of his constituents, and that would be a really interesting race if he's challenged in the future in a primary. I'm not saying it would be a close race, but that might be a little bit more interesting than perhaps this independent challenge.
And if that happens?
I'm sorry, it would be hard to move further to the left of Congressman McGovern, but you're right. That would be interesting.
And we would definitely talk about it here on The Rundown. We're going to take a quick break. The races for the State House that are affecting Western Massachusetts, we'll talk about that when we get back. This is The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back to The Rundown. Joining me for this pre-election day special, Clarence Fanto, Paul Tuttle, and Sam Hudzik. We're turning now to the State House. 3 House seats and 1 Senate seat here in the 413 have contested races. 2 of those 4 have been a bit sleepy, I'll say, with really little dust kicked up or by either candidate or much money raised. But 2 others have been more competitive races, and we're definitely going to start there this morning. Clarence Fanto, I'm coming to you. The 3rd Berkshire District House seat, we have Mary Beth Mitz and Lee Davis running. You've reported on this for the Berkshire Eagle. Both of these women have local elected experience at their respective select board level in Lenox and Great Barrington. The district itself has all the southern Berkshires and also a chunk of Dalton in there. Tell us about Mary Beth Mitz. Housing has been a top issue for her. Why?
She's been dedicated to housing for a long time. Before she came to the Berkshires, which I think was something like 20 years ago or more, she spent some time in Washington working for HUD, the housing agency. And she was very involved in the early years of affordable housing at that time. So she is quite dedicated. The 2 candidates are very well matched. They both have experience. There is a key difference, and we should say that they are running to succeed Smitty Pignatelli, who has represented South Berkshire for 22 years. He's one of the longer-serving, he's not the longest-serving state rep, but he's close to it.
And Mitz is the independent candidate here in the race, and Lee Davis is the Democratic candidate. Now,
right.
if I boiled down Davis's case to sort of one issue here, economic sustainability, and that's what you reported on. What has she said about that?
Well, she is very intent on heightening the profile of Berkshire County when it comes to state economic development. And her advantage, her perceived advantage, and I think accurately so in this race, is that she is a Democratic candidate. She has been endorsed by Senators Warren and Markey, by Governor Healy, by just about every major statewide Democrat in Massachusetts. And so she has a leg up. She's been to the State House several times for hearings to argue for workforce housing or affordable housing development. So that's an advantage. Mary Beth Mitz is an independent, and that's because she missed a deadline, an enrollment deadline, much to her regret. So if she won, she would probably caucus with the Democrats, but it is being perceived that Davis, who is seems to be quite a polished politician, Mary Beth Mitz is self-described nerdy, deep policy, very, very, very capable candidate. They're well matched.
But as you say, they are vying to replace Smitty Pignatelli, who decided it was enough driving from Lenox to Boston. How have these 2 candidates sort of made the case that they can move in and replace this institutional knowledge that he's garnered?
Well, they both have a lot of background and experience in the key issues that matter to the Berkshires, and we keep coming back to housing because, and it's certainly a statewide and national issue, but the cost of single-family houses and of rentals has just gone sky high. Berkshire incomes are lower in general than the rest of the state, and many people are struggling, having to work 2 or even 3 jobs to even afford a rental. So Mary Beth Mitz has been instrumental in attracting a very large affordable housing project to Lenox, which is under construction and will provide 68 units of various sized rental apartments. And there's a second one that she has championed that's also going to be built.
All right.
Future.
We'll keep watching that. And now I'm going to turn us to the 4th Hampden House. Kelly Peace, who is the Republican who holds that seat, is facing a challenge from Bridget Matthews-Kane. Adam Frenier of NEPM reported on this very competitive race. And Frenier spoke with these candidates. I want to hear first from incumbent Kelly Peace.
I'd like to continue to serve, and I do like the process, even though it can get frustrating sometimes, especially me being a conservative down in Boston. It can be a little tough.
A little tough for the Republicans there in Boston. Paul, what's your take on this race?
Well, this race is an anomaly, not only in Western Massachusetts, but statewide, because there is an incumbent state legislator who's facing a serious challenge. Peace was elected to the seat in 2020 with a plurality of 47% of the vote in a 4-person field. He ran unopposed for re-election in 2022. Now, that same year, the city of Westfield, which comprises the majority of the 4th Hampden district, actually voted for Jeff Deal, a Republican candidate for governor. He got 49% of the vote to the eventual winner, Governor Maura Healey's 48%.
Wow.
So, this is an area where this is a seat that Republicans held really for decades, until John Vilas held it briefly, until he ran for senator, and then Peace took it back for the Republican Party, as we said, in 2020. But the Democratic challenger, Matthews-Kane, city councilor in Westfield, has out fundraised the incumbent. Again, that's another anomaly. And this is truly on the surface of things appears to be a very competitive race.
And Matthews-Kane says that she views her Democratic affiliation as a big asset in this race.
Well, it's going to be easy to work with the people on the same party, and I know generally it will make it easier for me, and I think it will allow me to get more things accomplished in the legislature.
Maybe more things accomplished in the legislature, but using those numbers that Paul just pointed to might be a little tough to campaign on that in where she is.
I think that's making an affectability issue instead of just a party issue, right? Because Westfield it went for Biden in 2020, right? But before that, it went for Trump in 2016. This district, though, as Adam has reported in his coverage, now includes Southampton as well. It used to just include all of Westfield, so Southampton adding some more Democratic votes there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it shakes out. But I do think, it's also really interesting because Kelly Peace is the fundraising underdog in this. Matthews-Kane has raised quite a bit more money.
Yeah, well, very fascinating by all accounts. I'm going to turn very quickly to 2 state house races that I referenced that have been less competitive. We have the Berkshire, Hampden, Franklin, and Hampshire Senate seat, and it has that enormous title because the district is geographically quite large. We're talking 60 cities and towns, or nearly that many across these 4 Western Mass counties. The candidate, David Rosa, who's a Republican, told the Daily Hampshire Gazette that he's opposed to current state spending on emergency shelters and the recently passed gun bill. Unique element in this race, Rosa lives in Eastern Mass. He said he's searching for an apartment in the district, and according to the rules, he has to have that in place by Election Day. Incumbent Paul Mark, for his part, he told the Gazette that he's just kind of running on his campaign, on his long record here. He's a senator, but he was a longtime state rep before that, or quite a few terms anyway. And he advocates for higher education, the environment, and utilities and energy issues are kind of the big things he's been looking at. I'll swing now to the 2nd Franklin House race. Susanna Whips, an enrolled candidate, challenged by Republican Jeff Raymond. This is a rematch for these two, although Whips beat him handily the last time. And she said that Raymond said he's seeking re-election because he doesn't feel like she's getting it done for the district any longer. Greg Vine of the Athol Daily News reported that Raymond wants to, quote, get wokeness out of schools and stop transgender participation in sports. Whips pointed to housing as her top priority this time around and stressed the importance of her being a registered unenrolled. Thoughts on either of those races that have been a bit quieter?
I just think it's interesting about Susanna Whips being this independent. We were talking about Mary Beth Mitz a moment ago in the Berkshires. Susanna Whips is the only independent in the entire Massachusetts legislature right now, but she wasn't elected as an independent, right? She was elected as a Republican, and then during the first year of the Trump presidency, she was like, this party's not for me, and she became unenrolled. So I think she's been strong since then. She hasn't faced really much of a serious challenge. I don't foresee that changing with Raymond this time around. Same thing when we look at the race out in the state Senate race against Paul Mark. His challenger, regular candidate out in Eastern Mass, unsuccessfully run about a half dozen times for things.
Yep. Okay, well, there you have it, a primer on Western Massachusetts contested races. If you have questions about the 5 statewide ballot questions, you are in luck because we talked about that at length last week. So check out nepm.org/the rundown to listen back on that ahead of the Tuesday election. Before we close, I do want to touch on a piece in the Boston Globe earlier this month by Samantha Gross. The headline, "Harassment during the 2020 election was so bad, many Mass clerks quit. 2024 is shaping up to be just as bad." This is an issue that our newsroom looked at, the Berkshire Eagles newsroom looked at earlier in the cycle. Just the amount of stress and work that these town clerks, many of them who are often part-time employees, have to do. Panel, any takeaway from that piece? Clarence, I'll start with you, or what's top of mind for you heading into November 5th?
Well, as far as the town clerks are concerned, it's certainly true, and I check in nearly every day with our Lenox town clerk, who is also the president of the county-wide Municipal Clerks Association, Carrie Sullivan, and she says that many voters have expressed how stressful this year's election is, but no harassment here so far, with early voting winding up this weekend. But still, there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of nerve jangling going on.
Paul Tuthill, how about for you?
Yes, there is a lot of anxiety, and it was underscored, I thought, by the mayor of New Bedford, John Mitchell, held a news conference this week, an unprecedented news conference as he described it, to announce that plans were in place to ensure safety and security on Election Day. And he said these included things like additional training for police officers, poll workers, lighting that's being added at some polling places, entrance to City Hall, where they'll be counting the votes, is going to be restricted on election night. He stressed that there are no credible threats, but he felt it was necessary to make this announcement because of the level of anxiety surrounding this election.
And some of the more serious things that we've seen across the country, whether it's the burning of ballot boxes or the threats that some clerks have seen. Sam, what's top of mind for you?
I mean, I think when we look past Election Day, I mean, I think that's the anxiety. We've as you said, we've reported a lot on the town clerks and all of the stress that they're dealing. Just not enough time, just not enough staff, just not enough support in that case. But what about, after, as the tallying drags on with results that could be, not accepted, how that's all going to shake out. That's where my head is right now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Well, if you need a bit of a laugh, I have been watching these non-political lawn signs. They're sort of sprinkled across Western Mass. I've seen one that says "Dogs 2024" because people suck. There's quite a few signs reminding us that presidents are temporary. Wu-Tang is forever. All right, my thanks to this morning's panel, Paul Tuthill, Clarence Fanto, and Sam Hudzig. You've been listening to The Rundown. I'm Carrie Saldo. Election Day, November 5th. Get out there and vote.